This is Crowbar, standing in front of his end base on 2b2t. He built this block by block for 2 years, but as we speak, he's being hunted. This is Minecraft's most brutal server, so if Crowbar is found, he and the base he spent hundreds of hours on are doomed. This bridge is just one of Crowbar's magnificent creations, but if these builds are destined to fall from the beginning, why would Crowbar spend thousands of hours creating them? What drives him to do this? Why would anyone put so much effort into builds that could get destroyed in an instant? To understand that, we have to go back to the day Crowbar joined 2b2t. This place has no rules, so players can do things that are completely illegal on other servers, like turn spawn into a nuclear wasteland. In order to survive, Crowbar has to escape, but he also knows if he runs into anyone, his death is certain. Crowbar collects what meager resources he can, and arrives at the edge of a canal that will take him to the ocean and thousands of blocks away from spawn. The only thing between him and freedom is a boat. When he tries to get in, 2b2t's lag glitches the game, which causes the boat to sink to the bottom of the canal, trapping Crowbar underwater. There's nothing he can do. The waters claim him, and Crowbar is sent back to the hellscape he just barely survived. Crowbar returns, but once more, the boat does not cooperate. Third time's the charm, right? Wrong. With no other choice, Crowbar swims across the ocean the slow way. After 2 real-life days, he reached land, and when that finally happened, Crowbar needed resources badly. He raided a village and dug underground, where he built a couple of farms, including a villager breeder. But Crowbar was careful to stay hidden. Many 2b2t players used hack clients to give them an advantage, and one hack called chest ESP lets players see chests through walls. Even hiding them underground isn't safe. To stay undetected, Crowbar stored his items in droppers and furnaces. Now confident with the resources he collected from his farms, Crowbar resurfaced to construct his first real base, Poseidon Shire. In the face of 2b2t's chaos, building is an act of rebellion, and Crowbar's rebellion began here. He had built a tower, or keep, in his survival world, and wanted to bring it to 2b2t, so he constructed a miniature version, modeled after an alien probe. Crowbar was terrified he'd be discovered at any moment, so he built in a panic. He rushed through and finished the keep with great speed, despite the fact that he had to collect all the resources by hand. You might not be super impressed by these early builds, but they're the humble beginning and prelude to some of the most insane creations 2b2t has ever seen. Crowbar is an artist, and if you've ever met an artist, they cannot not create. The moment he finished the keep, Crowbar turned to the sea and carved ancient stone from the ocean's heart, using the blocks to create a mad scientist's aquarium, which was promptly taken over by Elder Guardians. After this, he still had a lot of prismarine, so he set out to build something nearly every single Minecraft player builds at least once in their careers: a pyramid. But unlike most pyramids, Crowbar's was going to be underwater. Originally, I thought he'd just used the structure of the ocean monument, but actually, Crowbar told me he built the entire thing from the ground up. This meant he had to drain the whole area of ocean by hand. To make matters worse, Crowbar didn't have any sponges, but nonetheless, he persevered. Crowbar posted screenshots of his builds to the 2b2t subreddit, which caught the attention of a player named Toshi. Toshi was the leader at the Winter Melon base, a base he started with his friend Vaxent after their previous Melon base was deemed too close to spawn to be safe. Winter Melon housed over a dozen players and became even more powerful when one of their members discovered a duplication glitch. Duplication glitches seriously speed up the process of getting resources because you can create a near infinite amount of any item with ease. So the Winter Melon squad had everything they needed to build a majestic base. Toshi invited Crowbar to join them, but Crowbar politely declined, so he could keep working at Follytonville Shire.
I said, no, there's a couple of things I want to finish.
Crowbar very nearly avoided disaster because Winter Melon was about to get destroyed. One of Winter Melon's members wanted to create some excitement, so he leaked the base's location to a griefing group. The Winter Melon squad caught wind of the fate that would soon befall them, but they weren't going to go down without a fight. On 2b2t, everything you build is destined to be destroyed. But even in the face of this chaos and disorder, players endure, which is exactly what Crowbar did. By now, Crowbar was growing accustomed to the ways of anarchy and had installed a hacked client to help him out. While building the Stone Tree Tower, Crowbar implemented a hack called FreeCam, which lets you fly around your body as if you're in spectator mode. While most builders design their structures in creative mode and then use mods like Schematica to paste them onto 2b2t, Crowbar built straight onto the server. He used FreeCam to maintain the symmetry of the build. If he placed blocks in a certain orientation in one corner, he could easily FreeCam over there to replicate it on the other side. Then, when Stone Tree was completed, Crowbar had an idea. What if I summoned a god? This was going to be way more difficult than Crowbar thought. He did have one thing on his side though, a duplication glitch. The glitch hunter Kinorana discovered if he loaded a donkey with items, got it to half a heart, and sent it through a nether portal with a cactus on the other side, more items would come out than were sent in. Kinorana made a video about this dupe, which he posted to YouTube. Crowbar saw that video and started abusing it. He wanted the god he summoned to be adorned with a magnificent black cloak, something that would require thousands of coal blocks. The duplication glitch was fixed 3 days later, but not before Crowbar duplicated the coal he needed. But when he started constructing the god, 3 players got in his way. They were sabotaging Crowbar at every turn, and they did all of this without ever knowing where he was. Those players were the glitch hunters Frickin', Bubba J, and Ox22. They'd found a way to harm every player on the server from one central location, and this was done with something they called the Apocalypse exploit. Crowbar was trying to build the Summon God when he got kicked off the server. Oh, no worries, sometimes that happens because of the lag. When he tried to rejoin, he realized the entire server had crashed. The glitch hunters discovered that if they could get 2b2t to think that their Minecraft player was in 2 positions at once, the server would overload itself trying to fix this. And the easiest way to do that was to type /kill while riding a pig in the nether. That was all it took to lag the server, sometimes to the point of crashing it. Because this was so easy to accomplish, Frickin' held nothing back. When the server crashed as Crowbar was building, he would practically go back in time. This made the Summon God nearly impossible to construct, but Crowbar persisted, and eventually Gerald's form took shape. Yeah, he named the god Gerald. Crowbar strategically placed Gerald right in front of his nether portal, which meant anyone who went to his base would get jump scared by a frightening figure. Unfortunately though, because of 2b2t's measures to prevent lag, render distance was limited to just a couple of chunks.
When you come through the portal, it's supposed to be intimidating, but with 2b's render distance at the time, all you saw was the hand.
As Crowbar was trying to build the rest of the cloak, Frickin' ramped up his use of the Apocalypse exploit. Crowbar could not make any progress. Because of this, he decided to accept Toshi's offer to join Wintermelon, but Wintermelon was destroyed. It's all good though. They moved to another base they called Summermelon. The only pickle was, Summermelon's located hundreds of thousands of blocks away from Follytonville Shire, which would take days to reach if Crowbar traveled through the overworld, especially because elytras were disabled to fight the lag of too many new chunks being loaded at the same time. That's why Crowbar had to go through the Nether. Traveling in the Nether is much faster than the overworld, but it's also far more dangerous. Especially on 2b2t. Chaos, destruction, withers, lava. If you want safe passage, you might think it's a good idea to use the highways, but hunters patrol them, searching for easy kills. Crowbar would never survive the journey alone, so he asked Vaxent to help him, but to do that, he had to give up the location of his base. If Vaxent betrayed him, all the work he'd done would be for naught, but Crowbar took the leap of faith. Yo, nice base.
Thanks, mate.
After playing 2b2t for months, Vaxent was the first player Crowbar ever saw. They made the Perilous journey together and arrived at the location of Summermelon. Many of Summermelon's inhabitants were part of a group called the Spawnmasons, which Crowbar joined as well. Crowbar, still frightened of what would happen if the base got discovered, built his contributions as fast as he could. He constructed a dragon winding around a mountain. Seeing this, the Summermelon crew was impressed by how quickly Crowbar built. When he first joined the base, Crowbar was absolutely terrified of other players, especially with the reputation they have on 2b2t. But these guys were different. Crowbar told me,
Because it was terrifying in the beginning, and then I come here and these were the nicest people.
It wasn't just the Summermelon squad though, it was also the Spawnmasons. The Spawnmasons were one of the most elite groups on 2b2t, whose members included some of the biggest names in the server's history, like the YouTuber FitMC, the historic Sato86, the Collector, Alpha Computer, and one of 2b2t's most notorious griefers, Jared 2013. Crowbar didn't have to worry about Jared though, because the Spawnmasons had a rule. You cannot kill a brother. At least, that's what Crowbar thought. At Summermelon, Crowbar met another player named Offtopia, who ran the 2b2t museum. The museum server hosted world downloads of different builds to preserve the server's history. When Crowbar finished his dragon, he adopted the base's steampunk theme and built a factory with a windmill attached. While Crowbar panic built with haste, the Summermelon squad took things a bit more chill. But because of what was about to happen, maybe Crowbar's panic was justified. During his time building at Summermelon, Crowbar was invited by the Spawnmasons to an end base called Space Jam. Space Jam was destroyed before Crowbar could do much, but he was drawn to the idea of having two bases at a time, one in the overworld and one in the end. Crowbar loved the idea of the totally contrasting environments, which meant completely different color palettes and building styles. When he got bored of one base, he could just switch to the other and progress there. But if Crowbar was to build an end base that would survive any reasonable amount of time, he'd have to build it far from spawn. Every block he traveled reduced the chances of his base getting discovered just a tiny bit more. But because elytras were disabled, this was a treacherous process. Crowbar ran across each end island and bridged between them, but he couldn't leave any trace, so every bridge he built, he had to destroy. Crowbar did this until he arrived at a spot tens of thousands of blocks out. But then, he was called back to Summermelon because of something urgent. They discovered another duplication glitch. Before that, if you're enjoying this video, subscribe to the channel so that I know you want to see more like this in the future. While you won't get punished for using duplication glitches on 2b2t, the server owner will fix them as soon as he finds out. Because dupes don't last long, you have to use them as soon as you get the chance. Crowbar returned to Summermelon and observed the base's stash, a full floor with double chests upon double chests, filled to the brim with shulkers of duplicated items. But Crowbar felt they could do better, so he expanded the stash, added another 2 floors to the building, filled those with double chests, and started hustling. Crowbar didn't know when the glitch would get patched, so he took that Monday off work and spent the entire day duplicating items. When he was finished, He hadn't doubled the stash, he tripled it. But maybe Crowbar shouldn't have taken a day off work just to duplicate Minecraft items, especially with how volatile things are on 2b2t. But he said,
I'm a big boy, I can have a day off every now and then.
Crowbar came back over the next couple of days and used the duplicated items to continue to progress on the base. That Friday, he logged in on top of a tower and was rather confused. He knew he should be seeing the base all around him, but for some reason, it wasn't loading in. He also saw some players who weren't part of Summermelon, like FitMC and Alpha Computer. Normally this would have alarmed Crowbar, but he knew these guys weren't there to harm him, since they were fellow spawnmasons. They must have been invited to visit the base. Anyway, Crowbar thought this was his hacked client causing the render issues, so he left the server and rejoined without the client loaded. But even in vanilla Minecraft, the blocks still weren't there. That's when Crowbar looked closer and made a startling discovery. The reason he couldn't see the blocks wasn't because of a chunk loading issue. He couldn't see the blocks because they were gone. Summermelon had been griefed.
I was left to my own devices. Many days fell away with nothing to show, and the walls kept tumbling down in the city that we love. Great clouds all over the hills, bringing darkness from above. But if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like nothing changed at all? And if you close your eyes, does it almost feel like you've been here before? Oh, how I'm beginning to be an optimist about this. How I'm beginning to be an optimist about this. If you close your eyes, does it almost feel like nothing changed at all?
Summermelon was destroyed, and it didn't just sting because they'd lost their base. It stung because of the betrayal of Fit and Alpha Computer.
There was a real letdown for my friends here that they got hurt, and I just felt so bad for them.
Fit claimed that the people at Summermelon had leaked the coordinates, or chords, of his own base, Rocket Town, so he griefed Summermelon to get revenge. But Summermelon was in no way responsible for Fit's base getting leaked. So some believe Fit just griefed it for views, or because he had beef with Auth. Crowbar told the other Masons what happened, and they decided to kick Alpha Computer from the group. Fit left with him. As for Crowbar himself, well, he didn't want to be part of any of that drama.
I left the Masons. I really didn't see the point in being in a group that was going to grief each other.
But maybe it was a good thing that Summermelon was destroyed, because it let Crowbar spread his wings and create his most impressive build yet, the mother of all keeps. With Summermelon gone, Auth invited Crowbar to his base, Numenor. Then they got their hands on another duplication glitch, the crafting dupe. This was a dupe that allowed you to turn any single item into a stack of 64 in just seconds. And the best part is, it worked on non-stackable items too, like tools, armor, and totems of Undying. Auth and Crowbar combined and expanded their stashes. With so many resources,
and that's when Auth said, no worries, hope you build something big.
Crowbar took that as a challenge. Crowbar's biggest build was the keep from his single-player world, which he could recreate on 2b2t. If he was to build it here though, he'd need a lot of space. Crowbar found a beach a couple hundred blocks away from Numenor and built TNT dupers to blow a massive hole down to bedrock. Crowbar didn't want to copy his single-player build block for block. Instead, he used its layout and structure, but filled in the details in a much different way.
There's a lot on here that just didn't exist in my single-player world.
He called this the mother of all keeps, or MOAC for short. At each build, Crowbar always tries something new. At Moac, he experimented with interior details to make the base more alive, and we'll see just how far his interior skills improve with some of his later builds. Crowbar made great progress on the Moac without any drama. He wanted to archive it on the 2b2t museum, so Authopia traveled the short distance from Numenor and got the world download. Crowbar also asked if the museum could archive Folly-Tonville-shire, which they did, and Authopia noted the Moac's location in the museum's Book of Chords. Authopia gave that Book of Chords to one of the museum staff members, Beardler, who later chronicled two famous bases, the Bodekin and Blockgame Mecca. Crowbar continued building his keep, but he eventually faced the biggest challenge 2b2t players will ever go up against: boredom. He lost motivation to continue building. Fortunately though, the Moac wasn't his only base. He had Incursion, but Crowbar was also part of another project, the most ambitious base in 2b2t history. When Fit destroyed Summermelon, he left most of its members baseless. At nearly the same time, a 2b2t group led by Burnsy, called the Nether Highway Group, finished a months-long project themselves. They created a tunnel so long it reached the world border corner, more than 30 million blocks out. Authopia realized this and went to his friend Willy Roof to start scheming. The Summermelon crew was now baseless. The Nether Highway Group was now unemployed. What if they combined forces? Authopia heard legend of the lost continent of Mu, which sank deep into the Pacific Ocean. Inspired by this, he declared it as the base's theme. Crowbar joined Authopia and the dozens of other basemates there. That's right, 36 people contributed to Mu Megabase without it ever getting leaked. Actually, someone did leak it, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Scouts traveled tens of millions of blocks out and found a suitable area for the build. But then, someone accidentally sent the coordinates of one of the tunnels in chat. After consulting, the Mu crew decided to abandon that location and leave it as a decoy base, while they moved even further out. When everyone arrived, they agreed on the following plan: a mountain at the center surrounded by a huge basin with a Greek/Roman theme divided into 12 districts. To terraform that much land, they had to bomb the basin to bedrock. Crowbar joined the demolition team with his bombing experience at the Moac. In Minecraft, TNT falls less than 80 blocks before exploding, so they had to bomb the basin in 2 layers. And did I mention that the area they had to bomb was over 1,000 blocks in diameter? The demolition team faced 2 major challenges with the bombers. First, 2b2t's lag. And second, the fact that the base was so far from spawn. Even after settling on a TNT bomber design that would work under those conditions, the task was not easy. They had to carefully stay with each bomber, and when they messed up, well, I'll just say the demolition team had a number of explosive mishaps. It took over a month to bomb the basin. When they finally finished, over a dozen of the Mu members got together for a celebratory screenshot. The Mu crew had to be incredibly careful. With so many people there, if even one person let slip what was happening, the entire project was over because of the types of people who play on 2b2t. There's players who do nothing but destroy any base they can get their hands on. One such player is Jared 2013, who's griefed hundreds of bases, including the famous Imps base and Space Valkyria. In fact, in May of that year, Jared went on a rampage. On the 1st of May, he griefed a base. The next day, he griefed another base. On May 3rd, he griefed a 3rd base. Players were bewildered as to how he was finding all these coordinates, but Jared had a secret weapon. 2b2t's world seed is public, which means you could actually reverse engineer people's coordinates using natural terrain. There was a whole bunch of natural terrain publicly accessible through screenshots people posted. On top of that, Jared could grab base coordinates from the 2b2t museum. To be fair, most of the builds on the museum were already destroyed, but not all of them. Using the museum and people's screenshots, Jared destroyed a base every single day of the month, including Folly-Tonville-shire. I asked Crowbar if he was sad about his first base turning to ash. He said,
At first I was a little bit miffed that no one griefed it. I thought, oh, it's not that important enough to grief.
The day after Jared griefed his 31st base, 2 huge builds, the Bodekin and Block Game Mecha, were also destroyed. Immediately, eyes turned to Jared, but he denied all responsibility. He had done his 31 griefs, and that was that. In fact, the bases were both destroyed by Beardler, the museum staff member who was given the coordinates to archive them. Even worse, someone found the book of chords Ophtopia gave Beardler and posted all of its contents to the subreddit. Crowbar saw this post and with a chill realized the location of his base was on there, the mother of all keeps. He rushed to move his dupe stash to a secure spot. When Crowbar logged off, players got there, but not all of them came to destroy it. The griefers and the tourists battled, leaving the keep in ruins. Since Beardler destroyed Block Game Mecha, its members moved to a new base they called Block Game Jerusalem. They also invited Crowbar, who gladly accepted their offer. Thinking back to Gerald, Crowbar constructed a gargantuan skull in the sky, strategically placed above the nether portal.
Yeah, so you come out of the portal, and then if you look up, there he is.
He named the skull Ralph. At Block Game Jerusalem, Crowbar also built an obsidian castle designed as a museum and a severed eye. There, he made friends with a player named Joey Coconut, who will be very important later on. When the basemates at Mew finished blowing up the basin, they were finally ready to start construction. Toshi designed the centerpiece mountain, and the crew got to work filling in the grass. This required hundreds of thousands of grass blocks, and what better way to get that than with a duplication glitch? 2 Mew members, AU Ion and Mining Minecraft, discovered the most powerful duplication glitch in Minecraft history. Because of how monumental this was, they kept the method as close to the chest as possible to keep it from getting leaked. As Willy Roof told everyone, "We will be relying on this in order to stock everything we need at Mew. In order to preserve our dupe, only these 5 will know how to do it." To get the items they needed, everyone had to make requests, which they tracked in a spreadsheet. Talking about this, Burnsy wrote, "Overall, we probably duped nearly 200 million items." Even with the duped items, the mountain took over 2 months to build. Mew's sketch had multiple canals surrounding the mountain, which Crowbar saw and envisioned a huge bridge to go across one of them. He then started designing it. Thinking about the theme, the basemates imagined a classic Greek village populating the mountain, almost like Mount Olympus. In line with this, Crowbar started designing the Greek god Poseidon himself, who'd watchfully sit at the edge of the basin. Actually, it wasn't just Poseidon. Crowbar could add Athena, Zeus, Ares, Apollo, all the Olympian gods, guarding over each of Mew's 12 districts. But then, the crew at Mew decided to change the theme from Greek to medieval, and Crowbar had to scrap his Poseidon design. He wasn't going to give up on Poseidon that easily though. Crowbar did have a location in the middle of the ocean where he stored many of his duplicated items. Originally, this wasn't meant to be a base. It was actually a collection of all of Crowbar's miscellaneous stashes, which he brought together to see how rich he actually was. It wasn't a base, but maybe it could be. Crowbar got started. He built a shipwreck, then placed the Lord of the Sea on top of it. Rather than make this base Greek-themed, Crowbar opted to focus on the oceanic side of things. He was hyped about Minecraft's aquatic update, which could come to 2b2t at any time, so he prepared for that. He constructed several islands to be a sci-fi meeting place for all the sea creatures, the new dolphins, turtles, and of course, guardians. Using his immense power, Poseidon summoned the ocean itself into the sky. Crowbar planned to fill these orbs with various sea creatures. Eventually, he realized 1.13 wasn't coming to 2b2t, so Crowbar had to settle with the blocks available. Using these, he populated the sea floor with coral. Despite being a small detail, Crowbar's favorite part of the build was a seahorse built near one of the islands. At Poseidon, Crowbar went through 3 dupes, the first of which was a donkey dupe. With it, he created a seed stash, a stash which had a shulker full of every single item in the game, just in case a huge dupe came along. And a huge dupe is exactly what the chunk dupe was, so Crowbar got incredibly rich off of Poseidon. But then, Crowbar got an unexpected visitor, Jared 2013. Whew. He knew the end was nigh. Jared discovered Crowbar's location using the coordinate exploit nocom, which allowed Jared's band of criminals to track the location of almost every player on the server, using only their movements. They used this to destroy countless builds and steal a gargantuan quantity of items. But Jared wasn't here to steal from Crowbar or destroy any of his stuff. He was simply there to see what Crowbar was up to, so Crowbar continued building. But he did move his dupe stashes to a secure location, just in case. One day, Crowbar logged into the account he left at Mew to have one last look at the base before moving it somewhere else. He was in the Nether, where the basemates had their portals, when he saw something that made his blood run cold. A griefer was here. How did they find the base, tens of millions of blocks out? Did someone leak? Crowbar immediately went into the overworld and saw someone placing TNT and lava all over the place. Who was this guy? It was one of his basemates. And now he was trying to destroy it. Combat isn't Crowbar's strong suit, but he had to try. He had to defend the base. Mew was no longer in any immediate danger, but if the griefer went public with its location, it was over. And that's exactly what the griefer did. When he leaked Mew's cords, nothing happened. Yeah, he tried to destroy the base himself. Yeah, he had the right location. But what would you think if you saw some no-name claim he has the cords for the biggest base in 2b2t history? All you have to do to find it is spend 3 weeks of your life traveling millions and millions of blocks out.
Way too far to come out here and check from some rando, spouting chords in chat.
Nobody believed him, and he was too lazy to travel there to do the dirty work himself. Mew was safe, but despite that, Crowbar wasn't spending too much time there. He was focused on Poseidon and Block Game Jerusalem, but whenever he got bored of those, he switched to the End to work on Incursion. He built there for years, which was not easy. One time when he was building something up in the air, he fell. He tried to use an elytra, but because of 2b2t's lag and Crowbar's Australian ping, he fell, then rubber banded, then fell some more. Crowbar died and was sent all the way back to spawn, and had to make the trek tens of thousands of blocks back. This happened again and again, and Crowbar was fed up with it. That's when he realized he could actually teleport himself to Incursion whenever he wanted, as long as he created a special Ender Pearl setup. If Crowbar threw a pearl into an unloaded chunk and then came back to the end and loaded it using a second account, it would teleport him tens of thousands of blocks in an instant. At Incursion, Crowbar conjured the Lovecraftian horror Cthulhu, engines of war to fight it, and a city suspended over the void. Crowbar kept coming back to build more and more. The base lay completely hidden for years, and with so long to work on it, Incursion turned into something absolutely magnificent. Remember the bridge Crowbar designed for Mew? Rather than build it at Mu, he decided he'd bring it to the end. This required a huge area, so Crowbar used TNT dupers to destroy so many end islands that looking out, you could see nothing but darkness. But then, disaster struck. 2b2t was hit with one of the most dangerous exploits in Minecraft history, the authentication exploit. Anyone who had the authentication exploit could log into anyone's account. All they needed was their username. People could log into Crowbar's account and see the precise location of his base. And that's exactly what the player Ox22 did. He joined 2b2t as Crowbar and saw nothing. He was looking out into an empty abyss. Of course, this was the area Crowbar cleared to build his bridge, and Ox22 could tell Crowbar was planning something insane. Ox searched around, saw Incursion, but he didn't destroy any of it. He told Crowbar he wouldn't leak the coordinates or anything. He was just curious about what Crowbar was up to. Crowbar could have stayed to build the bridge there, but
For such a big build, I thought, no, I'm not going to risk it.
he abandoned Incursion and set out to a new location to build the bridge. Ox22 stayed true to his word and never laid a finger on Incursion. But not every base was so lucky. And then there's Mu. Jared 2013 used the authentication exploit to log into the builders at Mu and saw the base and its coordinates. The exploit was patched before Jared could do much damage on those accounts, but that didn't matter because he now knew exactly where it was. Still, the Mu crew calculated it would be at least a week, and maybe 2, before Jared would arrive. It was simply that far out. With the strict deadline, they embarked on what would be their final act of defiance: flood the base, giving 2b2t's Mu the same fate as the myth that inspired it. Crowbar rushed to see if Poseidon was safe. When he arrived, it was clear the base wasn't griefed, but Crowbar saw something almost nearly as bad: nether portals that he didn't build. Someone had been there, and Crowbar didn't know if they were friend or foe. Poseidon was compromised, and Crowbar realized what he had to do. He moved 3 dupes worth of stashes to a secure location and called his friend Turban. Together, they destroyed the base before anyone else could. The authentication exploit sent waves throughout the server. Dozens of bases were compromised, and hundreds of accounts were cleared of all items and sent back to spawn. Many of these bases had lasted for years, but everything must eventually come to an end. When he abandoned Incursion, Crowbar still wanted to continue the tradition of splitting time between the overworld and the end. So he went to one of Offtopia's bases called Entopia, but Offtopia himself had grown inactive there. To Crowbar though, this was the perfect spot to build his bridge. He cleared a huge area, staircased down to the base layer of the void, and built with black glass, away from the other end islands. Crowbar constructed it from the void all the way up. This wasn't just any bridge though, this was an interdimensional bridge. To build the portals, Crowbar had to place a lot of purple glass, some of it floating in the air. To create that, he used slime as filler blocks since it can be instantly destroyed without any tool. With so many slime blocks falling into the void, Crowbar built a water system to prevent them from going to waste. Once the structure of the bridge was complete, Crowbar built a canal and little shops. The details on this are unreal. There's even an entire sewer system and secret passageway under the canal. And dude, look at how Crowbar designed the underside of the bridge. These arches are amazing. Crowbar gave the world download to Turbin, who made a fancy render which Crowbar posted to the 2b2t's subreddit. It completely blew up and became the subreddit's highest rated post of all time. But the bridge was all alone. How would things be different if the authentication exploit never happened? If Crowbar continued building at Incursion? Well, while Crowbar was constructing his bridge, a live streamer visited different parts of the end. And that's when he discovered Incursion. The live streamer began to grief the base, and people frantically messaged Crowbar that Incursion was being destroyed. Crowbar had known this would happen sooner or later, and he wasn't going to let the live streamer have all the fun. So Crowbar called up the best griefer he knew, Jared 2013.
Hey Jared, you want to grief a cool base?
Yeah.
I'll tell you where as long as you make a vid about it.
Alright, bet. What music do you want?
Black Sabbath.
With Incursion reduced to atoms, Mew and Poseidon gone, you'd think Crowbar would just quit. But he always comes back, because he always has another idea. Crowbar wanted to make something big, and searched for the perfect palette for it, specifically in the overworld. He needed to find a cool area for a base that was millions of blocks from spawn. And what's better than traveling millions of blocks from spawn to find an area? Starting millions of blocks from spawn and then searching from there. Crowbar logged into his account at Mew and began his hunt. Several million blocks later, he stumbled upon a chain of 5 mushroom islands in a row. In his mind's eye, he could see a magnificent castle on every island, each adorned with a distinct style and structure. This would be Crowbar's new overworld base. But then he got a message, and that message was from Jared 2013. What could Jared possibly want with Crowbar? Crowbar isn't a base hunter, he's not a griefer, he's not even a PvPer. Crowbar is a builder. The message, it was rather surprising. Jared started a base, and he wanted Crowbar to join. This is Jared 2013 we're talking about. I asked Crowbar, did you know what you were getting yourself into by accepting Jared's offer? He said yeah. Since it was Jared,
I knew whatever this was going to be wasn't going to last long.
But why not have some fun before its inevitable destruction? Jared founded the base with his buddy Orsund, and when Crowbar joined, he and Jared worked together to set the color scheme of the builds. They settled on a red velvet theme, red nether bricks, and quartz. There was another base mate named Yarnamite who'd started building with stone bricks and coal, but Crowbar and Jared completely disregarded that. Crowbar got to work building a tower as a proof of concept, and at that point, Jared and Orsund got bored and left. Crowbar continued building all on his own. When he realized Jared and Orsund weren't coming back, he wanted some help. He called up his friend Joey Coconut from Block Game Jerusalem, and Crowbar told Joey, hey, I have this base, feel free to invite anyone you want. If you trust them, I trust them. As Joey scouted for new teammates, they named the base Whitehaven. They reached out to a bunch of people, including Tanaxis from Block Game Jerusalem, Banana on 2b2t from the Spawnmasons, Gygo from the base Hopen, Docsmurf, a builder from the bases Niflheim and Yggdrasil, and finally, Crowbar's good friend, Turbin. Whenever Joey invited someone to join,
I warned them, this is Jared 2013's base. You know it's not going to last long. You're welcome to come and build for a while if you want. And then when they came here and saw how much I'd done, they were quite happy to.
Gygo built an evil tower, an entire landscape, and Joey worked on expanding the city. Many nights, he and Crowbar sat in voice calls together, having a great time, developing Whitehaven even further. Crowbar and Gygo branched out from the towers themselves, filling the entire landscape with farms and trees he's quite proud of. Also, take a look at how his tree game has evolved since Folly-Tonville Shire. When it came down to it, Jared founded this base, and that was a gift and a curse. When Whitehaven's location was found using the nocom coordinate exploit, The exploiters didn't destroy it because of Jared's involvement and because Joey is good friends with nocom's lead developer. But not everyone was so kind. An enemy player discovered Whitehaven just by happenstance. This guy didn't want to destroy it, but he did want to profit from it. The enemy stole supplies from the base and threatened to leak its coordinates if anyone tried to stop him. What could the Whitehaven members do? Though Crowbar felt really uneasy about it, there was a chance they could build more of the base without the enemy leaking. That's when Jared 2013 messaged Crowbar.
Jared got in contact with me, asked me, "Oh, what are you up to?" I said, "Still building at our base." "What?" He thought the place was griefed and it didn't exist anymore. He said, "No, I've been building it for months. I've invited other builders. The base is huge. Come back, I'll give you a tour of your own base if you like."
Jared came back and was like, "Yo, dude, this is sick," and even contributed to it himself by building a clock tower with Yarnamite's help. Since Jared was back though, the basemates knew Whitehaven's days were numbered. They returned, reinvigorated, and almost doubled the size of it in just 18 days. But that's when the inevitable happened. Jared and Joey Coconut had an argument, and Jared leaked the base coords to a griefer. And it wasn't just Whitehaven's coords he leaked, it was also Block Game Jerusalem's. The Whitehaven crew learned a griefer was coming for them, so Crowbar, Yarnamite, Geigo, and Orson destroyed it before anyone else could. These guys are so peaceful, man. They didn't even have TNT to do it. To destroy the base, they had to build withers, which they each named Whitehaven guards. Thus falls Whitehaven and Block Game Jerusalem. What can I say? Nothing can stop this man from building. If a base is destroyed, that's just the opportunity to create something new. Crowbar thought back to the thing Whitehaven distracted him from, the 5 mushroom islands. He now finally had the chance to get going on that project. This would be his most ambitious yet, so he assembled the Avengers of base building, Joey Coconut and Geigo from Whitehaven, Dark XL6 from Block Game Jerusalem, Turban, and another player named Waylon. They divided the islands between them. Joey got to work building the mushroom-themed Amnesia, complete with a giant mushroom tower, alien ship, and Venus flytrap. Geigo took on the island of Celestis. Inspired by mechanical gears within Minecraft, the entire island became part of a clock, populated with exotic plants and animals. Dark XL6's Exile had a medieval meets modern theme. Adventurers used Tesla coils to try harness the power of an ancient spire, but this had disastrous consequences. Turban and Waylon weren't super active, so they gave their island to SMCZ-19, who was a leader of the Astral Brotherhood group with Joey Coconut. SMCZ initially didn't know what to build, but he then took inspiration from Crowbar's towers at Incursion, but he put on an Atlantis-style twist. Crowbar himself adopted the island of Phenomena, terraforming the landscape to an extreme degree. The Earth itself was turned to liquid and magnetized by a crashing meteor. When that ground solidified, nature reclaimed it. Crowbar built trees on this extreme landscape, but one of them was struck by lightning and burnt down. To prevent this from happening again, he had to get creative. Thinking about it, Crowbar built a hurricane out of glass to block all lightning. In the end, Crowbar continued to progress on his interdimensional bridge, but as he was doing that, a player named Durka QT found a travel exploit. Durka started screen sharing in Discord and said, "I'm gonna hunt in the end, with cords on, and we'll split the first stash." Durka didn't realize it, but not everyone watching was trustworthy. A griefer named Imstex was waiting, just in case anything interesting happened. Durka didn't want to destroy the bridge, but somebody else did. With the bridge destroyed, Crowbar was back to Five Isles. He built a bunch of airships, but like the tree that burnt down, lightning was a huge risk. Crowbar had to create coverings, the vortexes of storms and hurricanes, to cover every single one of them. Each tendril of Earth that's pulled towards the meteoric phenomenon actually is a secret tunnel you can travel through. Crowbar populated every level of terrain below the phenomenon with flora and fauna, including a great number of rabbits. To do this, he created a complex rabbit breeder, which was designed so that with a flick of a lever, he could send the animals to each of the new levels automatically, and he could even choose which level they'd arrive at. There's also tons of parrots, which in Minecraft, unfortunately, cannot be bred. To get them here, Crowbar traveled to a jungle thousands of blocks away, tamed them, sat them down, went back to the Five Isles, and then had a friend place water on them, making them teleport to Crowbar's location. One of Crowbar's airships shot a missile at Joey's alien spaceships, so Joey reciprocated by zapping one of Crowbar's with a beam of electricity. This led to a full-scale alien versus airship battle in the sky. Down at sea level, surrounding the island, Crowbar also built a detailed seascape with ships including the Jolly Anarchist and the Queen Anarchy's Revenge. Below them, he filled the sea floor with coral, very much like that from Poseidon. Crowbar thought about it and realized he could stay here for years. Big plans were forming in his mind. But then, Joey Coconut learned something that sent chills down his spine. Joey was in a call with a player named Harrison, who had recently joined Joey's group, the Astral Brotherhood. Harrison was a base hunter and was following a chunk trail leading millions of blocks away from spawn. A chunk trail is a subtle footprint players leave behind when they're going into newly explored territory, generated terrain showing where they've been. And the trail Harrison was following? It started at Mew Megabase. Alarm bells went off in Joey's head. Five Isles might be compromised. With the interdimensional bridge gone, all of Crowbar's eggs were in the Five Isles basket. Thinking about that, he and Joey discussed and decided to start another end base. As it turns out, Harrison wasn't on his way to Five Isles. He was following a different chunk trail from Mew. But even still, he's a super chill guy. He probably would have left Five Isles alone anyway if he did discover it. In fact, Harrison was so chill that he told Joey Coconut about a teleport exploit he discovered in the end. Harrison had been experimenting with boats and end gateways and realized that when he pushed a boat into an end gateway, it would appear at end spawn for a fraction of a second before coming back to his location. If someone was at spawn waiting for the boat to appear, they'd get teleported to the end gateway, no matter how far away it was. Harrison told Joey about his discovery, and Joey realized if he put an account millions of blocks away from end spawn, he could bring his basemates there with ease. Joey started flying out, but he had to be extremely careful. 2b2t and Elytra flying have had huge issues in the past. There have been long periods of time when Elytras were totally disabled. Even with them enabled, it was risky business. If the server lagged at the wrong time, you could fall out of the sky, as if you were never wearing an Elytra to begin with. Joey flew out hundreds of thousands of blocks, but then, exactly that happened. the void claimed him, and he was sent back to spawn to start over. This happened multiple times, so Joey enlisted Crowbar's help to make the process safer. Joey traveled hundreds of thousands of blocks, then teleported Crowbar there. From that point, he traveled further and teleported Crowbar again. If he died, Crowbar could bring him back to that location, so every time Crowbar was teleported in, it was like they were setting a checkpoint. They did this for 3 months straight, with Joey traveling hundreds of thousands of blocks at a time until they were over 5 million blocks away from the center of the map. The chances of anyone stumbling on them were astronomically low, but they had to be careful. If someone followed their chunk trail, they had to throw them off somehow. So they built a small base they called Perilous Gigabase. But that was just a decoy. From Perilous, Joey traveled several 100,000 blocks away to what they finally deemed to be a safe location. They teleported in Turbine, SMCZ-19, and other members of the Astral Brotherhood to the base that would officially be known as Endhaven. It's a good thing they started a new base too, because the Five Isles was about to face its biggest threat yet. A player named 6WJ was searching through the Nether one day when he found a stash. This wasn't just any stash though, it was the main stash for the Five Isles. Traveling through the portals, he realized he discovered something incredible. 6WJ recruited his friend Key Bison to help him steal the items, and together they took the entire thing, hoping to profit from it by selling the stash for real-life money. When Crowbar and Joey realized the base was compromised, they had a tough choice to make. 6WJ said he wouldn't grief the base or sell its coordinates. But if he was willing to sell the stash, what would stop him from selling the location too? Crowbar and Joey didn't want to have another blackmail situation like at Whitehaven. But then again, maybe they could come back later, slowly bringing in more materials. After long deliberations, they decided it wasn't worth it, and reluctantly hit the self-destruct button. Follytonville Shire, Summermelon, the Moac, Incursion, Mew, Poseidon, Whitehaven, Block Game Jerusalem, the Interdimensional Bridge, and now Five Isles. Every single base Crowbar built was now destroyed. Whew. Losing the Isles hit hard. Crowbar could have spent years here. He told me this was his greatest loss during his entire time playing 2b2t.
This was sad when this one went down. I was really enjoying my time here.
Crowbar was ready to move on from the server, but he gave himself one last shot to make something great. But it wasn't just Crowbar. With Endhaven the only base left standing, its members went all in. Like Yomo Boyo and Legend Bakes from the Astral Brotherhood. Yomo was inspired by the floating castle from the anime show Castlevania and various churches and cathedrals, including St. Peter's Basilica. Inside, they housed the Iron Throne from Game of Thrones and a library of old books from 2b2t. One day, Joey Coconut was going through a book of different cathedrals and he saw one and was like, dude, this is epic. This is the Basilica di Santa Maria della Salute in Venice. Joey thought it would look incredible in Minecraft, and liked the idea of bringing an octagonal build into the game. Inside, he decorated the ceiling with patterns based on circular geometry, using basic trigonometric functions and Fibonacci numbers. After designing it, Joey's friend Sky256 helped with construction. With an interior so large, Joey was struggling to fill it, but then the idea came to him while he was at a museum. Joey saw a half-finished statue, a work of art never completed because the artist passed away. Inside his basilica, he could house 6 versions of the same statue, each at a different stage in its life. Joey was stumped on the design though, so he called his friend Riceland, who started with an unchiseled block of stone. Then a statue half-formed, completed, and decayed. Joey didn't want his cathedral just to be floating in the void though. So he built an entire island for it to sit on, and terraformed it with the theme of ice and fire. Another of Endhaven's builders is X-Ray SA, who got famous on 2b2t for the 3D renders he brought to Minecraft at his previous base called Foxfall. X-Ray SA was also part of the 2b2t Spawn Aquarium project, where players filled the Spawn water cube with oceanic creatures. X-Ray had a huge fish render he wanted to bring to 2b2t, but felt it'd be a waste to build it at Spawn where it'd quickly get destroyed. Instead, he brought it to Endhaven, but made some modifications. Taking inspiration from the artist Gregory Fremento, who often illustrates giant animals with mechanical attachments on them, X-Ray built his fish in the same vein. Normally, building in the end is quite difficult, but 2b2t updated to 1.19, which brought a whole bunch of new features and new exploits. One such exploit was the Trident Fly exploit, which basically gave hacked client users creative mode flight if they were holding a trident. X-Ray put the trident into his offhand and was able to build the fish as if he was in creative mode, which made things so much easier. Before we get to Crowbar's Endhaven creation, there's something else. While all this was going on, a base hunter was searching the end, and he had a unique strategy. He flew in rings around end spawn, 100,000 blocks out, 500,000 blocks out, 1,000,000 blocks out, and 5 million blocks out. Every time he stumbled upon a trunk trail, he marked it, which effectively let him know the location of every single base in a 10 million by 10 million block area. This hunter discovered Entropolis Gigabase, and he followed the trail to Endhaven. He didn't destroy it though, because he was a chill guy. You might recognize his name actually. This base hunter was Harrison. Harrison didn't only not leak the base, he also covered for it, lying to the community saying he didn't discover anything in that region of the end at all. This kept the base protected until, well, we'll get to that. Meanwhile, Crowbar was thinking about the future, far into the future. How would a future civilization live if they were powerful enough to harness the energy of a black hole? They might live around it. Crowbar spent months designing a black hole, ringed with a city. He brought it to 2b2t, and Turbine made a render of it, which they posted to the subreddit and YouTube. When they did that, Crowbar described the build, saying,
2B is like a black hole for my time. So I put a ring on it.
When the server updated to 1.19, it became way easier to follow chunk trails in the end. It was as if the game itself made an illumined pathway straight to Endhaven. Harrison had been the first non-base member to find Endhaven, but with these new changes, he certainly wouldn't be the last. Crowbar, Joey, and the others decided they didn't want anyone to have the satisfaction of destroying the base. On 2b2t, everything falls. But for Crowbar and his friends, building was never about making something permanent. It was a rebellion. A shout in the void against disintegration and decay. A shout against the inevitable.